a platform where talks are so inspirational and motivating that it has the power to transform the lives of the listener.
A program of local, self-organized events that bring people together to share a TED-like experience.
Welcome to TEDxYouth at DPSMIS.
TEDxYouth at DPSMIS is organized by the young and ambitious students of DPS Modern Indian School. Our aim is to deliver an event that surpasses all expectations and leaves a lasting impact on our audience.
The theme for this year's event is Changing Currents. Changing currents refers to the unpredictability of life. Things don't always go our way, but the choice between making the best of it or succumbing to the pressure is solely in our hands. As the event approaches its 7th year in the making, we continue to stand as the longest-running youth event in Qatar. Without any further ado, let the evening commence.
Our first speaker is an extraordinary individual who has invented a spectacular device in the field of football that helps the referee detect offside violations accurately, analyze players' performance during the game, and notify about injuries. This invention is not only unheard of, but is also a game-changing development in the world of technology and the sport. He was also the Qatari representative in International Youth Meeting 30 in Morocco and in the Islamic Youth Summit. Most recently, in Stars of Science Season 13, he has achieved the highest rating among the jury members in all 4 different stages and won the 3rd Best Arab Inventor in 2021. He has also given several speeches and conducted various workshops for the youth in hopes of inspiring them to make the change they want to see in the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mohammed Al-Qassabi.
Who are you to invent? You are still young. Just quit whatever you are doing and join us to have some fun in Sea Line. Assalamu alaikum everyone, my name is Mohammed Al-Qassabi. I'm an Information Systems Senior at Carnegie Mellon University and the Head of Robotics and AI Department at Qatar Scientific Lab. I'm here today to share my journey with you and how my passion about football made me succeed in many other different fields. Since childhood, my favorite hobby has been football, just like everyone else, and I wanted to join a football club so badly. But my parents wanted me to focus more on my academics, since it's more important than football, and that's what I did. I used to play football every weekend with my cousins in my grandfather's house, until that day came that changed my life, I think forever. It was my turning point. The day was the 2nd of December in 2010, when Qatar won the right to host the 2022 World Cup. At that time, I felt that my country is hosting the biggest football event or the sport event in the world, and it's happening for the first time in the MENA region. So I wanted to have my fingerprint, or I wanted to play a significant role in my country's success in this big tournament. So one way that I thought of was joining a football club, so hopefully I can play with the national team in that tournament. So I went to my parents again and told them that now is the time to join a football club. They told me it's okay if you get high grades in your school. And that's what I did. But they said there is only one condition, which is I have to balance between my academics and my trainings and matches with the football club. And I agreed on that. I always cheered up for Al-Sadd club, which my father hated. So I wanted to join Al-Sadd club, but my father told me it's either Al-Ahli or Al-Arabi club. I'm not sure why, whether it's because he hated Al-Sadd, but he said that it's because Al-Ahli and Al-Arabi are closer to my home than Al-Sadd, so I can have more time to study at home before joining the trainings. So I said, okay, it's better than nothing, and I joined Al-Arabi club. And in my 2nd season, I was able to impress the coaches and I was given the captain sign. And some older players were feeling like kind of jealous because I'm still new, they are older than me, and yet I got the sign of the captain. And I used to play, they all used to play 1 match per week, but I used to play 2 matches per week, one with my team, and the other match was with the elder team. The elder coach used to call me in many different matches because of my performance. And in 2016, I was called to play with the first team. The first team coach called me to play a football match with their team, and I was kind of scared because I was only 16 years old playing against players like their age is between 22 and 35. So it was kind of scary, but I was able to get a good impression during the match, and I played the whole 90 minutes, which was kind of impressive to play the 90 minutes in this age with the first team. And also the coach was really impressed by the performance, and he called me for another match. So I think I had a very good career, especially that I played most of my matches with the elder teams. A few years ago, I lost an important match in the semi-finals. I remember it was against Al Rayyan, and usually the games between Al Rayyan and Al Arabi are intense and tough because it's the derby here in Doha. Unfortunately, we lost the match, but it was because of a wrong offside call by the referee. So I was really upset and went to the referee screaming, "It's offside! Why you should stop the goal?" But he said it wasn't offside, and I can't blame him because it's hard for referees to keep track of offside players and take their decisions in milliseconds, especially when there are many players in the same area. In 2002 World Cup alone in Brazil, there were more than 35% of wrong offside calls made by the referees, which proves how hard it is for them to keep track of the offside players and take their decisions in milliseconds. So I thought, since modern technologies is solving most of our daily lives problems, why don't we use the technologies to solve these problems and solve the offside problem? But then I thought, why do we wait for others to solve this problem while we have all the abilities and the skills to do that? So I was in high school at that time. I did not have many knowledge about technology, so I started to do some research. And that's when I found some small sensors, and I was able to build a small prototype with simple sensors that were like moving around the field to keep track of offside violations. At that time, I remember there was a competition in Doha for schools. It was a scientific competition. So I decided to participate in that competition with this idea. Before the competition, we had to meet some engineers from the organization of the competition to discuss some things about the idea that we are participating with, and also the teachers in our school so they can prove the idea. And both the school teachers and the engineers said that this is unfeasible. You can't implement this idea even after the competition. So try to change the idea. But I insisted that I participate with this idea because I really believed in this idea and know how much referees suffer to keep track or take their decisions. So I participated with this idea, but I did not win. I was also like really upset because I really believed in this idea, but I thought it's only a competition. Why should I stop now? So a few months later, I participated in a scientific competition for the Gulf countries. It was happening here in Doha. I was the youngest participant, and what I liked the most is that most of the participants liked my idea because they were football fans as well. So they know how much football fans suffer from these kind of things. But I also did not win anything in this competition. I was also upset, but what made me continue was how the other competitors liked my idea, especially that they are familiar with these kind of things. So I decided, when I was 18 years old, I decided to apply for Stars of Science show, which is for Arabic inventors. And I went all the way to Lebanon to pitch my idea in front of the jury members. And when I did so, one of the jury members said that I don't see this as an invention, and I can't see you as an inventor with this project. So he rejected me. At that time, I felt that there is something wrong. Like, I was rejected and I lost many things in a short time period. So I was really upset, and for some few minutes I thought that, okay, it's time to stop and think of anything else. Also, some of my friends told me that, why are you doing all of this? You are still young, you can't change the world or change the football rules. Just come join us and we'll go have some fun in Sea Line. But before leaving Lebanon, before coming back to Doha, I had a plan. I thought that the jury member that told me that who rejected me was wrong, and I wanted to prove that he was wrong. So two weeks later, I started to build another prototype, which was kind of a little bit bigger, with using different technology, better technologies than the one I used for school. And I was chosen or nominated by the Qatar Scientific Lab and the Ministry of Sports and Culture at that time to participate with the Qatari delegate in the International Invention Fair in the Middle East, which happened in Kuwait in 2019. And suddenly, out of a sudden and surprisingly, I won the gold medal. No one expected that. including me. And I was really happy that, okay, now I think I can see this as the beginning of the journey. I want something finally, and now I can begin the journey with this prototype and build it to another level. A few months later, I also participated in Doha Oasis for Innovation, which was part of the Doha, the capital of the Islamic youth competitions. And I also won the gold medal. And I still remember when I won these medals, whenever I had a football match and the referee don't see the offside violation, I will go to him and I'll say, one day I will replace you with my machine. He didn't know what I'm talking about, but I know that one day something will happen. So after winning these medals, I thought that, okay, I have a solid prototype for now. This time I have to focus more on the business part. So I have the technology part, so now I have to think of the entrepreneurship part. So I participated in Al-Fikra competitions, which is for entrepreneurs. And there were different phases, and I was able to reach the final stage, where they chose only 3 in each category. And when we pitched our ideas, I noticed that I was the only competitor that had no team. They all had like team set up and ready, and they were all like old enough to compete, and I was the youngest. But after we all pitched and before the winners were announced, some of the competitors came to me and said, congratulations, we think you won, and we wish you all the best in your future career. And that's what happened. I won the first place in Al-Fikra competition, the startup category. I was really proud that I was able to go throughout all of this journey, especially being the youngest in most of these competitions. So a few months back, I thought of participating in Stars of Science again in season 13. I was a little bit nervous because I remembered what happened 2 years back and how I was rejected and the way I was rejected. But I said, I was advised by Abdulrahman Khamis, who is Stars of Science alumni, to apply, and especially that I have university also in the same time. So he said, just apply, and then when you get accepted, you can choose whether to drop 1 semester from your university to complete with Stars of Science show, or you can just drop Stars of Science and complete your semester. I said, I will apply, and I have nothing to lose. So I applied, but this time I felt that I was confident that I can go further, because I had like a solid prototype, and I also gained many different skills throughout my university career and the competitions that I participated in. So I pitched my idea, and I also was accepted to be one of the top 8 Arab inventors to compete in Stars of Science show for 3 months. So at that time I had a hard decision. It's either to compete for 3 months in Stars of Science or drop the 1 semester from university, or drop Stars of Science and complete. I did not want to drop my university because I will graduate late. And at the same time, I wanted so badly to compete in this show because I was rejected once, and now I'm accepted. So I thought it can be a challenge if I chose both, but I did because I like challenges. And the good thing is that at that time, everything was remotely, I mean university, because it was COVID. So I was able to go to Stars of Science labs from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. to work on my project, and at the same time, attend my online lectures in the lab. And after 6 p.m., I would go back home to finish my assignments and study for my exams. It was really hectic, and I was really exhausted during these 3 months, but I think it's worth it because I learned many skills, many things that I don't think I will learn anywhere else for maybe 5 years. And I learned everything in 3 months. So I was able during these 3 months to build a fully functional prototype for my project that doesn't only detect offside violations, but also analyze players' performances and injuries during the game. I called it OPAS, which is a shortcut for Offside and Performance Analysis System. So during these 3 months, we had 3 main phases. And each phase, they will eliminate some of the participants based on their progress. So we'll pitch our ideas and the progress in front of the jury members again, and they will eliminate some of us until 4 reach to the final. Luckily, I was able to get the highest grade or the highest rate from the jury members in all 3 phases. And in the final stage, I was happy, like no matter which position I take, I am a winner because I have a solid prototype that I can work on after the program. And also the program is on TV, so I have the marketing part where all the stakeholders can see my invention. And I have all the skills that I need to complete my project afterwards. And also one advantage that I had during the program is that in my major, I study both technology and business, which makes me an entrepreneur, unlike other participants who were like 100% technical. And one thing that made me really nervous before the show, or some of my family and friends told me, is that I'm competing against like doctors and engineers from all different countries in the MENA region, and I'm the youngest one, and I think the only one who did not finish the university yet. I was confident because I think during the past few years I went through many different similar experiences where I competed with people who are older than me, like in football and in other competitions. So I was really, I believe that age is not a way to measure how skilled I am. So I just continued and I got the highest grade in all 3 phases. In the final phase, it was 50% based on the jury members' point of view and 50% based on the voting. I was also able to win the jury members' votes. I got the highest grade. And collectively with the voting of the public, I was able to win the 3rd best Arab inventor in Stars of Science this show, season 13. It was a really great achievement to be the 3rd best Arab inventor. And some of my friends thought that this is the end of the journey, but because I won a big thing. But I never thought of it as the end, but as the beginning, because the end will be seeing the project implemented in the football matches. So 2 weeks later, I also saw an announcement of another competition, which was worldwide this time and happening in Doha, which is an advantage for me since I will be here. So I applied. It was the Challenge and Innovation Forum. Inventors from all over the world came to Doha and competed against each other by presenting their inventions in front of the jury members. I was also able to win the 5th best inventor in the world in the CIF in 2021, which is also a big achievement, especially that I was also one of the youngest participants in that competition. So at the end, I think I proved what I believed in, which was age is not only a number, and your degree is only a proof that you have the skills. But you might have different skills without a degree from university or anything else. So I always encouraged youth to be active in the community, no matter how young they are. As I said, age is only a number and not a way to measure their skills. As long as they have the passion about what they are doing and work hard, they can achieve anything and nothing can stop them, because you can still do whatever you want. And age, I don't see it being young. I don't see age as an obstacle, but as an advantage, because as a young person, you can have enough time to work on and achieve many bigger things. And that's all I have for today, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mohammed, for those remarkable words. You've certainly convinced us that age is just a number. And with a little bit of hard work and a lot of perseverance, no dream is too big to achieve.
Moving on to the next speaker. Introducing, for the first time ever, our first international speaker. He is an extremely graceful Indian classical dancer based in Delhi, who has had an extensive training under the renowned Kathak exponent Guru Srimati Gitanjali Lal for 14 long years. He is a graded Doordarshan artist and a recipient of various scholarships from CCRT, Sahitya Kala Parishad, Kathak Kendra, and many more. With numerous performances in prestigious events like Commonwealth Games 2010, London Olympics 2012, Republic Day celebration in Morocco 2017, Asian Meet Singapore 2018, he has also been conferred with various awards that includes Natya Mayuram, Nritya Nrityati, Mr. Delhi Times, and very recently, Mr. North India 2019.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Avinav Mukherjee.
Joshua Graham said, quote, "I survived because the fire inside me burned brighter than the fire outside." Unquote. We know that there have been substantial changes in the past few years owing to the pandemic. We also have to understand that how our life varies on such difficult timescales and the impact of challenging atmosphere. What I have understood from the theme, Changing Current, is that how, as an individual, I can keep my viscosity intact even when multiple negative forces are applied on me. How I can survive, sustain, burn, fight, and yet rise again from the ashes. In such times, we have to become like wet sand. When you pick up a handful of wet sand, it becomes firm. And Some of it will flow between your fingers, pushing apart the tiny grains. Similarly, we have to become firm from our within, absorb all the constantly occurring turbulences, and push apart the negativity, cynicism, pessimism that life has to offer. I may be representing myself today as an arts ambassador, cultural ambassador of India, but I am a broken pottery myself, only mended with gold and silver to fill the cracks. Now, when you fill your broken cells with gold and silver, you start seeing aesthetics and start appreciating beauty in incompleteness. I started learning Kathak, which is one of the 8 classical dance forms of India, at a very young age of 4. I would dance for hours and hours in front of the television on random Bollywood songs, and my parents saw that. They gauged the knack in me, and then they decided to put me into dancing. We lived in Singrauli, a very small town in Madhya Pradesh, where I was born, and we came to Delhi for my cousin sister's wedding. It is then that we met legendary Kathak exponent Guru Srimati Gitanjali Lal. We visited her class, and I was awestruck by that whole image where, dancers were dancing rigorously, sweating, and the sound of different instruments, sarangi, tabla, pakhavaj, sound of the ankle bells, the ghungroos of footwork, and that whole atmosphere was absolutely magical. I can still visualize that. It is still very fresh in my memory. My mom asked Gitanjali ji that if I can train under her, but because we lived in a very far away state, it was difficult for us to, do that. But my parents were so headstrong that they decided to bring me to Delhi every 6 months for good 10 to 15 days, and that is how my training started. I would come to Delhi every 6 months for 10-15 days, learn under the tutelage of my guru, and then go back and then practice whatever lessons I have learned, and then come back again. This went on for good 6 to 7 years until we finally shifted to Delhi so that I get a better education in dance. Now, as a professional dancer, my journey may seem very easy, may sound very easy, but it was not. Even though I had encouraging parents, but my peers were not supportive. My relatives, they were not supportive. I was constantly bullied, and I was called with different names like Nachne Wala, Nachne Wali, Nachaniya, and all sorts of derogatory words that would break me into pieces. I would come home, cry, and tell my parents that this is not something I want to learn, but never told them the reason behind my hatred for it. I became very reserved as a person. I then used to think that, is there any prerequisite condition to fall under a specific gender identity to exhibit dance, or is it the art of the body and soul that exemplifies it? Male dancers have been seen outlandishly in the society because it has been considered for most of the part as a feminine style, and it has been difficult for male dancers to grapple with such societal barbs and stereotypes. What I have understood is maybe it's the lack of knowledge, lack of education, lack of awareness, lack of exposure in the society. Now look back in the history, you will see that the earliest dancers, dance scholars, dance critics, historians, they were all men who have nurtured it. Whether it is Gopi Krishna ji or Uday Shankar ji, it was always men who have left the first impressions. They were the India's answer to Rudolf Nureyev or Eric Brown of the West. Society is very ignorant also towards it, because we have considered arts, music, dance as extracurricular activity and not part of the main curriculum. And we know that the foundations laid in the primitive years of our childhood is very important, and that makes us. When I visit rural areas and villages to teach dance to the underprivileged kids, I have realized that how naive, how innocent, how unaware these kids are. But equally loving and accepting because they love it. They love what they see when I teach them. It is only in the urban areas that such discrimination lies, and we in the urban, we call ourselves to be educated. In the society, people will often ask me, what utility is there in arts? When I say that I'm a dancer, they will ask me, what else do you do apart from dancing? Because, because for them, it's non-utilitarian, these art forms, whether it is singing, dancing, pottery, painting, because it can't be reduced into a commodity, and it's difficult to survive when you opt for career options like these. In the countries where people become money-minded, art starts disappearing. Leo Tolstoy rightly said, quote, "We often believe that the greatest force existent in the world is the material force. But the artistic force that makes us spiritual is insignificant to us. However, it is that there the true force resides that modifies our life and the life of others." Unquote. And rightly so, because when on the one side I was being constantly bullied and I was listening to these kind of remarks and loathing, on the other side, I was encouraged by my parents, by my guru, by my school teachers. They would often tell me to participate in school competitions, in functions. And it is then that I realized that I am doing something very different. I would be the only boy dancing in those competitions, in those functions, and that made me stand out from the crowd. I started realizing that this is something very different from the crowd, from the herd, out of box that I'm doing, and slowly that gave me confidence, and slowly I started feeling proud of what I was doing. I started changing as a person. I became more empathetic, more I started resonating more to people, to nature, to animals. I started loving the sunrise, sunset, the birds chirping, the river flowing, the trees, the flower blooming. And it is then that I realized that how our mean and rude world asks us to rejoice the ego of individuality, whereas we must rejoice the ego, we must rejoice the bliss of infinity, isn't it? And these are the soft skills that make us more humane. We lark back, Indian classical dance larks back to the image of Lord Nataraja, Lord Shiva, who is the embodiment of masculinity and femininity. But why are we constantly seen through the prism of gender, sex, and queer studies? There has to be a masculinity and femininity in all of us. Only then there'll be an equilibrium. Dance has taught me the harmonious blend of inner silence and outer celebration, and also outer silence and inner celebration. These struggles, these remarks, these constant hurdles that come our way acts as a sword. The sword will cut us into two, only then the two will meet. Through these conflicts, we will rise as a person, we'll become a better person. Through struggle, contouring will happen. Through war, peace will flower. And these hurdles are equally important, these challenges are equally important in our life. They make us a better person. They give us more power to fight back. They give us the strength, the stability in our life. And, you know, as a professional dancer, I still find challenges. There are still so many problems that come my way. In an era of multinational imprints, power suits, private jets, I'm still struggling to find a place for myself here. But thanks to the reality shows, the dance performances, the cinema, the digital era, Instagram, that we have got a lot of opportunities, we are getting a lot of opportunities, and we are getting some sort of spotlight, limelight. I really hope and pray that all of us have the courage to pursue whatever career options we want in our life without having to sacrifice, without having to compromise. There is a saying that time changes people, but I really hope that may you be the one that change the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Avinav, for that sensational talk. Someone somewhere might have needed to hear those exact words for that last bit of encouragement, and we're so glad you could be that someone for them.
Our next speaker is an environmentalist and a policy-oriented social change advocate. He is best known for his work in the youth climate movement and environmental and climate policies in the Middle East. He is currently the co-founder and executive director of Arab Youth Climate Movement Qatar, a first registered youth-led non-profit association in the state of Qatar. He is a board member and on the steering committee of various organizations like UNESCO Youth Climate Action Network, Coalition Wild, and many more. He is also a regional facilitator at UNEP for the Middle East. In March 2019, he was named in Apolitical's list of the 100 most influential people in climate policy 2019. His articles and interviews have appeared in France 24, Al Jazeera, BBC, Washington Post, The Gulf Times, and many more. He holds a master's degree in environmental engineering and is based in Doha, Qatar.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nishad Shafi.
We know the global climate crisis is getting severe and noticeable across the world. Looking at the rising temperature and the climate impacts in the Middle East especially, which is home to some of the hottest climate in the world, and the region's high temperature in some of the countries have been reaching as high as 55 degrees Celsius, make the region particularly vulnerable to climate change impact and extreme weather events. To put in perspective, some of the countries in the region, including United Arab Emirates, Oman, Saudi Arabia, recorded temperature as close as or higher than 50 degrees Celsius lately in 2021. As the climate change impacts are now being more visible, young people in the Middle East are waking up to the existential threats that the climate change poses and how the increasing temperature would affect their day-to-day life. But the actions by numerous youth and climate movement organizations in the Middle East region gives us hope to our policymakers and analysts that the grassroots initiative may galvanize how youth fight against climate change. However, the climate movement faces limitations in the region that is beset with numerous other issues. The region is facing crises like youth unemployment, conflict, so the daily survival becomes more important to many of the young people than the issues of climate change. But most importantly, they have also been neglected by the Western media and also the local media at the same time. With the recent COP26, which took place in Glasgow, in Scotland, many of the young people from the Middle East were not able to be represented. And this gives us a space that young people from the region are not part of the global climate conversation. It is worth considering how the youth in the Middle East region have been always fared and expected to fare. While historically they have been excellent in campaigning and advocating and working for the grassroots organization, the current global climate conversation doesn't include the young people from the Arab region. It is not surprising that there aren't many climate protests or marches like that of Fridays for Future or Extinction Rebellion. That doesn't mean the youth climate movement doesn't exist in the Middle East region. While the protest on the street may not be our modus of operandi, education, awareness, policy raising have been activities young people have been actively involved in. Through this way, young people from the Arab region made sure their voices have been heard by their governments and also their communities. 10 years since COP18, which held here in Doha, young Arabs, activists, researchers, and entrepreneurs from the Arab region came together in helping and designing ideas and innovation from bottom-up solution to how to reduce the impact of climate change and also raising awareness in the community. Today, Arab youth are the first generation to come of an age amid rapid climate change, and they have the most at stake in how their society responds to it. Climate change will bring economic and environmental challenges and also at the same time, opportunities. They've been working over the time to how to implement climate education and awareness and action in most of the Middle East countries, but it have never been on the headlines of global or regional media outlet. But the upcoming COP27 and COP28 summit in the Middle East, in Egypt in 2022 and in the UAE in 2023, gives us a hope that would give voices of many of the young people in the Arab region and the upfront. Moreover, this summit would also give a change of how the global north see the work of young people from the Arab region, which are part of the global south. The tendency of the media to present only the global youth from the global north is going to save the world is problematic, especially for the activists from the Middle East region, whose media invisibility leads not only being not recognized organization, but also not able to work or partner with international agencies. Young people in the global south, especially in the Middle East, been tackling climate change for years, and they couldn't be celebrated over the years because of the negligence from media and also some of the local stakeholders. So it becomes absolutely critical how they have to also be celebrated. While the young people in the Middle East continue to work towards a common goal of fighting climate change and advocating climate justice issues, the Western and regional media must also highlight their contribution, not with just one or two faces to highlight, but the whole movement of climate change activism within the region. Thus, doing so, the future generation, when they talk about the youth climate movement in the Middle East, it will not be a single narrative, and it will be clear that young people are fighting together for climate crisis doesn't exactly mean to fight on the streets, but also galvanizing their energy and activism towards local actions or grassroots programs. A collective and inclusive movement is thus an absolute necessity to show how the young people and the young climate leaders can work together to form an unstoppable force, equipped with necessary policy knowledge and awareness that will help them put forward the pressing issues of climate change to their governments and respective communities. To put things in perspective, representation and elevating voices of Arab young people is necessity, because to protect the future of our planet, it is critical to have all the voices and all the faces come together, joining hands. We need a global climate movement which is inclusive and representative of every part of the world. Thus, the whole fight against climate change will be an inclusive and just one. So I hope our young people from the Arab region are given the necessity stage or platform to work and extend their voice against climate change at the global climate conversation. So the fight goes on, and we are all collectively responsible for our actions. Let us fight together for a global world which is just and equitable, and bring climate change impacts to all the communities who are facing it, and help elevate the people out of poverty and also at the climate change at the same time. It is necessity how we as young people work together and collectively in fighting climate change.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nishad, for that phenomenal speech. In today's world, I believe we've become desensitized to such important issues because of how constant they've become in our lives. Thank you for reminding and encouraging us to take action and do our part to give back to this world.
Keeping the event moving, our next speaker is our second international speaker, who is an MSc-educated business development and marketing professional with a joint BSc in Psychology and Health Science. She is the founder of Faith Consulting and an adjunct lecturer in Virginia Commonwealth University. She has an extensive experience in the healthcare and education sector and an impeccable track record of achievements in digital communications, marketing, and project management. Her passion lies in meeting stakeholder objectives whilst building team morale, encouraging collaboration, and creating a positive and productive workplace environment. She combines analytical skills with a sensitivity for aesthetics and flawless education, with a hands-on collaborative approach to content production.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Dana Habayeb.
Hello everyone, my name is Dana Habayeb and I am talking from my room today because I tested positive for COVID. I am supposed to be a local speaker, yet here we are. I think that is totally in line with this year's theme for TEDx, which is changing currents, looking at all of these changes that are happening around us and how us as humans have been so adaptive and resilient to these changes and how we do that. Today, I want to talk to you about why we can never stay happy, but also we can never stay sad. We seem to fluctuate between the two all the time. And why do we do that? I want you to think about a time where you were in trouble and you were extremely upset or anxious or sad, and you thought, oh God, I can't find a solution to this situation, feeling like you're going to stay like this forever. You're going to stay in this situation forever and feeling that you're going to be sad or depressed forever. And I want you to think about times where you were extremely happy, you were falling in love, or you got a new job, a new promotion, and you felt like this level of happiness that you're in, again, is going to last forever. We all know from experience that that's not true. The happiness doesn't last forever. And the sadness also doesn't last forever. It seems that we always return to a certain neutral state or a basic level of happiness. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. It's a concept called the hedonic treadmill, looking at how humans, all of us, go through levels of highs where we're extremely happy with something that's happening in our lives. We return to a basic level of happiness, and oftentimes we go down into a state of depression or sadness. And again, though, we return to a basic level of happiness. And the interesting thing about this phenomenon or concept is that we all return to different levels of happiness. So my basic level of happiness can be very different than my friend's basic level of happiness. We all differ in these things. The basic or foundational level of happiness can change from person to person, but for the individual, for the individual themselves, it stays oftentimes the same for their entire life. They need to put a lot of effort into changing that level of happiness. And that's why you'll find people that are just happy people their whole life. And some people are at a lower level of happiness, again, for their whole life. The set point of happiness is determined 40% by genetics, which is why it's quite difficult to change. It's a significant part of your happiness, whereas 60% is in our control. And that's what I want to talk about today, the things that are in our control. So why, first of all, do we go through these fluctuations? It's a process of sensitization and desensitization. So for example, when something new happens in your life, you fall in love, you are sensitized to the situation, you're focusing on it, your senses are like, ooh, this is something new. So you're excited and happy. But over time, you stop feeling that way because what was once new is now normal. So you've become desensitized. In situations of extreme poverty, of losing your job, you're shocked by the poverty or you're shocked by war. But over time, you become desensitized because it becomes a normal thing in your life that you've gotten used to. You're no longer shocked by it. And that's why tourists, for example, when they go to countries that are extremely impoverished, they get extremely upset. And they stay like that for a while. Again, even they get desensitized. But when they go in, they realize that the people living in the situation are oftentimes continuing with their life as if, not very much has changed for them, or not very much is happening. They have birthdays and they have family reunions and they celebrate things despite being in an extreme state of poverty. That is, they have become desensitized to the situation. And that is the process of the hedonic treadmill, that you will be extremely sad at some point, but over time you become desensitized. And that's why you go back to a certain base level of happiness, or your happiness set point. I talked once to a recruiter, and she referred to the hedonic treadmill without actually referring to the hedonic treadmill. Essentially, what she was telling me was, when she's hiring someone, even though she has a certain budget for that individual, she tries really hard not to reach the absolute maximum she can offer that person. And the reason that she does that, even though she knows that would make them super happy, is that if she can make them super happy with a lower budget, it's better for her, because in her experience, over time, after 6 months or a year, the person inevitably becomes less happy with the offer that they were originally excited with, and they want more. They want a promotion, they want a higher salary, and she wants to leave room in her budget to be able to do that for them after a year, because otherwise, she has a really hard time retaining those employees. Again, despite the fact that they were super excited about the offer when they got it. And so even though she didn't know it was called the hedonic treadmill, that is the phenomenon that is occurring there. I want to talk now about how do we increase our happiness set point, because that is the whole point of this talk. How do we make ourselves just generally happier, even in our neutral state? There are 3 aspects that we have control over that we can put effort into in order to increase our overall happiness. The first concept, and the most important one, is participating in acts of kindness, or altruistic acts, where we do something nice to the people around us, for the people around us. We help them out, we help out our community, our family. And there are a couple of reasons that this is one of the main ways of increasing our general level of happiness. The number one reason is that we remove the focus from our own lives, what's happening with us, to what's happening with the people around us, because everyone is going through something, right? And then in addition to that, interacting with the community over and over again, it increases levels of connectedness, which is increasing your oxytocin levels. It's a hormone that makes you feel connected to people. It makes you feel loved and valued. And just by default, the fact that you're doing something kind for someone, or you're helping someone else out, makes you feel like you are a valuable member of society, like your life matters, and that inevitably increases your happiness set point. Now, the second way of increasing your happiness set point is by looking at your locus of control. Now, what does that mean? It means that, for example, if I have an internal locus of control, it means that I hold myself accountable when negative things happen and when positive things happen. So basically, if I had an exam, for example, and I didn't do well, I hold myself accountable. I say, you know what, maybe I didn't study enough. Last time I didn't study enough, so next time I should study more. I should go to the professor's office hours. That's an internal locus of control. People with internal locuses of control are just generally happier than those that have external locuses of control. So now, what is an external locus of control? I think you could probably figure it out, but it is essentially someone who blames other people, external factors, for positive and negative things that happen in their lives. So again, back to the exam. If that person did the exam and didn't do well, what they would do is say, well, the exam wasn't written properly. It was confusing. The professor didn't do a good job explaining this concept in class. They're not taking any accountability for what they contributed to that situation. And you can see why this can affect someone's overall level of happiness over time. And usually it's because someone with an external locus of control isn't going to take the necessary actions in order to fix this problem next time. So they will continually put themselves in these negative, not self-serving situations. The third concept is that neuroticism, your level of neuroticism, also impacts your happiness set point, the set point that you return to. Now, there are 5 big personality traits, and you can go online and look them up. There's, your extroversion, your neuroticism, and a whole bunch of other things. And so what you can do online is do a test to see where you lie on the level of neuroticism, because out of the 5 personality traits, it's the one that determines your happiness set point. And so what is neuroticism? It's essentially someone's ability to deal with stress, deal with negative situations. Usually people who are neurotic, they think that the smallest thing is insolvable. It gives them extreme anxiety. They overthink the situation. They don't know what to do with it. They're very risk averse, and they don't have the ability to kind of get out of that situation of stress very easily. Even if it's a minor level of stress, they're very anxious people. Now, neuroticism in the past was it was a very useful thing to have. Being neurotic meant that you were going to live longer, you were going to do better in life, because at that time, there was a lot of life or death situations. We were hunter-gatherers, we were living with animals, we were living in the middle of nowhere. We didn't have massive communities or systems of safety that would make us feel like we were in control. So being a little bit more neurotic gave you an edge, because you were really focusing on all the things that can go wrong and fixing it before it happens. Over time, as we became industrialized societies, we were definitely in a lot safer communities than we were in before. Neuroticism became a bit maladaptive. And so now people who maintain that neuroticism aren't doing as well. Most people have reduced the level of neuroticism because it's not necessary anymore. We don't need to be at that level of hyper-awareness. The individuals that maintain that level of neuroticism typically have veered away from this idea of spirituality. And so they have what is called death anxiety. So essentially what this means is that in order to reduce the levels of neuroticism, we need to believe that this life isn't all there is. This material world isn't everything. There's something beyond this. There's a sense of almost immortality, because after this life, there's a whole other thing that's going to be happening, right? Whereas people that are high in neuroticism, they found that sometimes they have a feeling that, well, you know what, spirituality is not a thing, afterlife is not a thing, so this world is what matters, and it increases the ante, right? Because now you're hyper focused on the material aspects of this world, which don't always work out, right? It's always shifting and changing. And so they feel like, well, I'm going to die, and if this is all that matters, I need to get it right. And it puts a lot of focus and makes them highly neurotic. So the solution here is to try and participate in things that make you feel like this life isn't everything, and there are other aspects, other things that are of higher importance, and just getting in touch essentially with your spirituality will make you feel that way. Now, those are 3 ways to increase your happiness set point. How can we use those strategies as a couple? So when you get married or when you fall in love, you are at an extremely high level of happiness. But over time, you live with your partner and you become desensitized to the things that made you so excited about them. How do we take these strategies and make sure that we can create sustainable, happy relationships and we don't get bored? Because oftentimes you do hear people say, I am bored with my spouse. We've been together for years. They are boring. I don't really like them anymore. I don't want to hang out with them. I find that it's just super banal. And sometimes they say, I'm not even really that attracted to them anymore. Why is that? It's the same individual oftentimes, right? They haven't changed that much. But it isn't that they've changed or not changed. It's oftentimes that we've just become desensitized and we've returned to a set level of happiness, which isn't so much a problem if we're aware of that. But the question is, how can we increase that set level of happiness as a couple so that we stay interested and we have these sustainable long-term relationships? So the first strategy of participating in acts of kindness. I think as individuals, if each individual on their own participates in acts of kindness that will increase their happiness set point individually, which will still be good for the relationship. But now, imagine that you did these acts together, especially if you do something kind together that you couldn't do on your own. This would condition your mind to associate this partnership with this higher value of being able to participate in these acts of kindness that naturally bring up your happiness set point. Number 2, your locus of control. Now, in a relationship, you'll find that sometimes people will take accountability for the things that they're doing wrong in the relationship. Perhaps they have communication issues, perhaps they have baggage from their past, and they're able to decipher through those issues to see how it is contributing to the negative aspects in the relationship. And in some relationships, you'll find that no, they have an external locus of control where they're not looking internally, they're looking at their partner. My partner does this. My partner doesn't do this. My partner isn't listening to me. And they're not taking into account the aspects of themselves that are contributing to that. Of course, those with internal locuses of control that are able to hold themselves accountable generally have better relationships because they are able to change the aspects of themselves that they have control over in order to bring on more positive outcomes in the relationship. Now, the third thing is the level of neuroticism of one or both of the partners. If you can reduce the level of neuroticism in the partnership, then you will have more long-term happiness and increase that happiness set point. And you can do that by participating in acts of spirituality and really talking to each other and focusing on the higher level aspects of this life and not just the material gains and successes that you're having on a day-to-day basis. What is the meaning of this life? Where are we going after this life? What can we do that will improve our status after this life is over? Because not everything is about the material aspects of this really finite period of time that we live on Earth. Doing these things as a couple can definitely increase the happiness set point of that couple. And also, in my opinion, if we're looking at the hedonic treadmill and we're seeing that we have waves, and we're always going to have waves no matter what the happiness set point is, my question is, as a couple, how can we increase those higher frequencies, the higher points of happiness? And the way, and research has shown that the way couples can do that is by participating in new activities, right? Remember when we were saying we are sensitive to new things happening in our lives? We can create these experiences on purpose with our partners. So participating in new, exciting activities together will make us experience these higher level of happiness and associate that high point with that partner because we're conditioning ourselves, those emotions, to be connected with our partner and the memory of our partner. So those are the number one ways to not only increase your happiness set point, but also increase those high points. That is all I think I have time for today. I hope this really helps you guys understand happiness, understand how you can increase your level of happiness and have great long-term relationships, have better health in your life, better well-being, because that is what happiness does to you. And I really hope that you guys have a fantastic year, no matter what changes you're facing and no matter what changes you're going to face, to know that not everything is permanent. This is all very temporary and we always return to a basic level of happiness. And if we can just increase that, even better. Have a great year, guys. See you later.
Thank you so much, Ms. Dana, for sharing some of your exceptional thoughts with us. Living in such a dynamic environment, it is easy to lose our spirit and energy due to changing circumstances. It is important to remember that our mental health needs to be a priority and do everything in our power to ensure that we take care of it.
Our last speaker for today is an individual whose passion lies in designing solutions that advance quality learning for the world's most marginalized. She is the Director of Innovation at Education Above All, a global foundation reaching 10 million out-of-school children. In her previous roles in the Ministry of Education and Qatar Foundation, she was responsible for conceiving multiple creative solutions, including Teach for Qatar, a national literacy and numeracy program, an innovative future school, and interdisciplinary impact models for the university ecosystem. She serves on the board for Mantra for Change, an Indian NGO serving 50 million learners. She received an M.Ed from the Harvard Graduate School of Education and a BA from the University of Pennsylvania.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Janvi Maheshwari Kanoria.
Good morning. My name is Janvi Maheshwari Kanoria, and I'm very excited to share my story with you. Today I'm going to teach you the alphabet. So A stands for apple, B stands for ball, C stands for cat, and D stands for doll. But you already know this. And so do a majority of our children around the world who have the privilege of being in school. But this is not the case for 263 million children who are globally out of school. That is 1 in every 5 children. What's really worrying is that this crisis is just growing, and it's growing at the pace of 30% every single year. In addition to that, we have 130 million children who finish 4 years of schooling without learning how to read or do basic addition. Now, everyone says that this is an impossible challenge to solve. Everyone says there's no solution. And they're right. Because if we continue the same conventional system of education, these children will always be unreached. And frankly, any system that is failing 1 out of every 5 of its beneficiaries needs to be seriously reconsidered. But then we had this golden opportunity to reconsider. Because in April 2019, when the pandemic started, our conventional education system came to a grinding halt. And schools around the world closed down. And every single child was suddenly out of school. So we as educators had this opportunity to be agile and innovative and think of really new and different ways to reach each and every one of these learners everywhere, wherever in the world they were. And so what did we do? We all moved to different models of online schooling. And now let me show you how that worked. For a second, just close your eyes. Now, what do you think of when I say distance or remote learning? Now open your eyes. I know what you were thinking. But come on a journey with me for a second. So imagine I took away your distance learning superpower. No internet. No online school, no Zoom calls with teachers, no videos, no games, no emails. Now imagine that I took away all your physical resources. So no textbooks, actually no books of any kind, no stationery, no educational resources. Now imagine that I told you your parent who is at home with you is semi-literate or has to go out to earn a daily living and cannot support you with your education. Now finally, imagine that I told you that you had no technology whatsoever. No iPads, no computers, no smartphones, not even TV or radio. Now this is the reality of distance education for more than 50% of households in developing countries. No technology, very few resources, and no access to a parent who can overnight become an educator. So it should not come as a surprise to you then that 465 million children were completely unreached through the course of the pandemic. That's 1 in every 4 children. But then I work at Education Above All. And Education Above All is a Qatar-based foundation that focuses on the most marginalized children around the world, and we help them access quality learning. And I lead our innovations team. So my role is to find some of the hardest to solve, trickiest problems and design and pilot new solutions for these. And I'm very happy to report progress. In the last 2 years, our innovations team reached almost 1 million children. We worked with a network of fantastic champion partner organizations on the ground. And we reached children in Sudan, in Morocco, in Lebanon, in India, in Pakistan, in Kenya, in Afghanistan, and some of the most deprived contexts. We worked with children who were refugees. We worked in urban slums. We worked with tribal children. And we worked in the most remote of rural contexts. We even worked in some places where there were no schools. Forget them being closed. We worked in some places where there were no books. We worked in places there was no access to educated teachers. And some of the places we worked, the only technology available was a simple feature phone. And that too, it was shared between family members. So I have to apologize in advance because the pictures I'm going to show you moving forward have been taken by some of these feature phones. But we developed what is known as the Internet Free Education Resource Bank, or IFERB. Now, IFERB is more a learning approach. It consists of multiple different educational resources. And the idea is that children should be able to learn from their own surroundings, inspired by things around them. The very simple philosophy is designed to help all children, whether they're special needs learners, and really any child who's between the ages of 2 and 14. And all of this is available to be technology-free, low resource requiring, and very, very easily facilitated. And by implementing these around the world, I have learned some very fundamental lessons. I want to share these 5 shifts with you. So shift number 1, we move from teacher-led to community-based. We very rightfully eulogize our formal education teachers. So much so that sometimes we forget our first teachers, our families. But at homes with low literacy, they are sometimes so excluded from the learning journey, and that causes a huge chasm in learning proficiency. So what we did, because we did not have any access to such teachers, is we decided to capitalize on the really powerful life lessons that some of these communities know, and a lot of their innate knowledge. So we had grandmothers in Kenya tell their grandchildren folk stories so that the children could learn literacy in the absence of any books. So the children listened to the stories, they then rethought them, they reimagined them, they modernized them, and they authored these beautiful storybooks. In some parts of the world, these storybooks have been placed into small community libraries that the children made themselves. Imagine this happening in a place which had never previously seen a book. I want to now tell you the story of 12-year-old Leba. So Leba grew up in a very conservative district in Pakistan. Most of her conversations with her mother were about mundane topics like errands, cooking, groceries, and so on. And then she had to work on the family tree project. So her mother, being the primary source of information, had to share a lot of information with her, and she had to interview her mother constantly to gain all of this knowledge. She then, over the course of the week, represented this information to her mother. She shared a geographical map of migration to show her where the family came from. She showed Venn diagrams to illustrate commonalities and differences between family members and also talk about genetics. And then she took to statistical representations to share the average age of certain incidents or events in their family lives. Her mother was so impressed with her daughter's abilities that she herself took a very bold move. She cancelled her impending child marriage and re-enrolled her into school. All it took was Leba to showcase her own talents to her own mother. Shift number 2, from classrooms to streets. Learning has become like a job, right? It's 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. and it's within these 4 walls of a classroom. But you know, when school buildings closed down, we had this opportunity to free learning. So now it can happen anytime and anywhere. And actually it can happen all the time and everywhere. So just imagine what happened when children set up stores on the streets. They wanted to attract customers, so they made colorful and beautiful posters. They sold everything that they thought could be sold, from agricultural produce to homemade handicrafts. They learned literacy and numeracy by preparing invoices. But you know what they really learned? the very tough art of negotiation. And just imagine the magic of the mud streets of Zambia converting into number lines. Children are jumping and they're playing while they're practicing simple math. I can promise you that it'll take us much less than 4 years to teach them simple addition. Shift number 3, from globally standardized to locally relevant. You know, the people who write curriculum are often educators who are sitting in ministries in faraway capital cities, and they can't even imagine the lives of many of these children. For us too, it was impossible to imagine that these children had no idea what a comic was, they hadn't seen a book, they had never seen a newspaper, and in some cases, they didn't even know what the news was. So we had to really think about learning that was relevant to them. And in a really standout example for us, in a tribal area of Chhattisgarh, which is a Maoist-dominated conflict zone in India, learners told us that they had never seen an apple to identify with the letter A. They normally eat the staple forest produce. So what we did is we told these tribal children to design their own alphabet book. And often A is more accurately represented with an axe or an arrow. And then when we moved to Sudan and we tried to teach them about geography, they asked us to teach them about floods because that's what happens there. So we had children design their own different models to understand how flooding happens and what human behaviors cause floods. They designed their own evacuation plans. And then do you know how they learned density? No, not in science labs. They learned density by making their own personal flotation devices. And these life jackets were made out of scrap plastic bottles. And then finally, think about how different the same project would look to two different children. So a simple project that we had around making your own ID cards. For a 9-year-old Arif, who was an Afghan boy in a refugee camp in the US, it was his way to hold on to his past, to his identity. It was also his way to understand and learn about the new people around him. But for 14-year-old Hasina, it was the first time anyone had ever asked her about her preferences. It was the first time that she had a personal identity which was different from the village collective identity. Just imagine how simple a space we need to create for projects to become different for different learners. And now, shift number 4. We need to stop asking our students to stay silent and raise their hand. Let's please start asking them to speak up and use those hands. So, everywhere in the world that we worked, we actually had to convince our learners that there's no example to copy, there's no formula, there's no format, and you have to use your own creativity and imagination. But you know, once unbridled, it was like magic. These children are unstoppable. I want to tell you about an example when we were learning about COVID-19. And this is in the early days when there was limited awareness and there was a lot of misinformation. So children from Kashmir to Kenya learned how to practice sanitation by washing their hands and understanding basic practices of hygiene. They then went on to understand how germs spread by doing multiple experiments. And then finally, they had to design their own house rules for COVID. Now they went one step ahead and they said, let's design our entire village rules so that the village knows how to distance. In places where there were no masks, they said, let's design our own masks. And in one standout example, they even created their own contactless sanitizers. This is what our children can do, so let's stop underestimating them. And finally, shift number 5, from facts to discovery. We didn't have access to textbooks, so we did not have the ability to say, here is the right answer. We just had to let students run with it. We had to let them observe, make their own conclusions, create hypotheses, experiment, and really hopefully come to the right answer. So in an example from Lebanon, where the children were working on a population census project. Now, in this project, they are supposed to interview their family members who are at home and then create a lot of different statistical representations of the information and come to certain key conclusions. Now, the conclusion they came to was that the unemployed women at home worked harder and longer than the formally employed men in their families. Not only this, the women were also more ambitious. Now, this is a lesson that can never be taught. So, if I can leave you today with one thought, it would be the sense of possibility. Wherever there is a genuine desire to learn, there will be a means to move forward. The reality is that COVID-19 exposed some of the deep-rooted inequities in our society, and it was a huge setback. But it was also a great opportunity to be completely unshackled from the constraints of curriculum and classrooms and assessments. So in places where there was no technology and no schools, our fantastic implementing partners designed their own makeshift outdoor school spaces. They put loudspeakers in the community so that the children could hear instructions. They used group-based phone calls. They even wrote instructions on the village wall. And despite all odds, we had 80% of the children in our program finishing it. So in places where there were no materials, we designed our own materials. Children made their own rulers, they made their own scientific tools, they made their own dice. And in one lovely example, they made their own walkie-talkies so that they could stay connected when there was a lockdown. And when there were no teachers, we had to rely on our own self-belief. So children observed, experimented, drew, painted, and did whatever they needed to come to their own conclusions in learning. They relied on older siblings, family members, and whoever they had access to. And doing so, we made some miraculous leaps in learning. We learned over 18% in just 3 months. And not just this, learning was a lot of fun. We had students proactively line up outside their facilitators' homes and ask for the instructions for the day. We had them beg their parents that they could join the program. And if you see in this picture, you would know that we had an oversubscription to one of our programs by almost 250%. And you know, our fantastic partner organizations on the ground championed the cause to the extent that even skeptical parents or government bodies changed their minds. So a year after we finished our pilots, 70% of them have continued using the same methodologies. And I tell you all this because I know it's possible. All our materials are open source, cost-free, and available on our website. So please try it for yourselves. We have hundreds of IFERB resources, from project-based learning to game-based learning to activity-based learning, and each of them promises a week long of learning, and it integrates lots of different subjects, makes it very interesting, and mimics the real world. But luckily, we're also not the only ones. We're just one in a glittering sea of examples of such change which has come out in these very difficult times. And all this does is prove to us that we're out of excuses. So imagine a world with me where A stands for an aeroplane, but A also stands for an animal. Imagine a world where A stands for Australia, but it also stands for Angola. Imagine a world where every single one of our children is learning, no matter what their context might be. Imagine a world in which we score a 5 out of 5. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Janvi, for your thought-provoking talk. You are such an inspiration to all of us, and you've made us realize how fortunate we are in receiving a proper education.
And with that, we come to the end of today's event. Thank you so much for being such an amazing audience. I'm Tehnid Qadri.
And I'm Krishna Ravishankar. And we're signing off. Now, off to our lead Sriram and co-lead Sneha.
Thank you, Krishna and Tanyat. Colin Powell once famously said, A dream does not become a reality through magic. It takes sweat, determination, and hard work.
And this dream could not have become a reality without the help of so many people.
Firstly, I'd like to thank the management, Vice President DPS Modern Indian School, Mr. Yasir Nainar, Honorable EC members, Principal Ms. Aslan Hafiz, and Vice Principal Ms. Soma Bhattacharjee for giving us this blessed opportunity to host such an important event. Without their unconditional support and guidance throughout, this event wouldn't have become a reality.
Thomas Edison definitely knew what he was talking about when he said, "Good fortune is what happens when opportunity meets planning." I'd like to thank the various departments of our team for their impeccable contributions and mind-blowing ideas, which really took this event to the next level. Those late nights of planning, those last-minute changes, and those long hours of shooting today makes it all worth it.
We'd like to start by thanking our event management and logistics head, Krishna Ravi Shankar and Tanyat Kadri. They, with their magnificent oratory abilities, were able to conduct and narrate the entire event with utmost professionalism and perfection.
Next up, we would like to thank our curator, Soumya Tibrewal. She, with her adept verbal communication skills and excellent writing ability, was successful to be able to contact all of our extremely qualified regional and international speakers. She maintained close contact with the speakers and assisted them with prepping their speeches.
We'd also like to thank our marketing and financing heads, Aditi Potnis and Pratyush. Aditi, who spent many nights devising various new and different strategies for marketing, was responsible for the outstanding promotion of the event. Pratyush was responsible for handling all of our finances, and without him, we'll be missing an important component of the team today.
Up next, I have the honor of thanking one of the most crucial parts of our team, the graphic design heads, Abel Jain and Noel D'Souza. They began working long before the rest of the team did, spending many late nights formulating and conceiving a vast number of ideas for the filming of the event. Not only were they involved with every single department, but they were also responsible for handling technical glitches on the day of the event.
Coming up, we have the head of press, Surya Selvan Narendran. He, with his impressive camera and recording skills, was responsible for capturing the pictures of the event. He also guided the press volunteers and helped them sharpen their own photography skills.
Next up, we have our visual design heads, Hania Ahmed and Siddhi Prasad, who were responsible for decorating the stage and ensuring that we had a very aesthetically pleasant view at all times. I would also like to introduce our executive producer, Tisha Jain, who was responsible for researching the volunteers and coordinating the event schedules.
Finally, we have our infotech heads, Ehsan Ali and Satyam Agarwal, who were responsible for creating and coding the website. Their ambitious goals for our website showed it make it look visually pleasing.
Thank you so much for tuning in our event and following us along our journey. You have been an amazing audience, and this has been an absolute delight. Thank you.
Thank you.